many businesses struggle to deliver sustainable business value from their data and AI investments. At InfoSeps, we are experts in unlocking the value that lives within your data to strengthen decisions. We are a global data solutions firm on a mission to bridge the gap between the worlds of business and analytics. We've joined forces with the Ravit Show to bring you the most cutting-edge data and AI insights.
All right, team, welcome to the Ravit Show. I hope I was getting some background reception, but I think everything's good. All right, I still get that. So that's why the delay, but let me know if you all can hear me fine. And we live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Super happy to host a very interesting guest today, Franco Patano, lead product specialist at Databricks. We'll discuss how the Lakehouse, a little about the Lakehouse platform, Semantic Layer, and Delta Live tables that can come together to pre-process and conceptualize organizational data for Dolly 2.0 and open source LLM. Last week I was at Gartner doing a lot of interviews, and definitely one big topic was LLMs, AI, generative AI, and much more. So I'm kind of super interested to your Franco's take on it, and then we'll definitely be learning a little about the semantic layer and much more. So feel free to let us know and ask any questions that you have for Franco. And also we're doing a very cool raffle that we always do, which is a swag of the Ravit Show. So what you need to do is just type in hashtag the Ravit Show in the chat, and you will enter the raffle. And towards the end, or maybe after the show, we'll be announcing the winner. So look out for that. But without any further ado, I think it's time for us to bring on Franco Patano here. Hey, Franco, welcome to the Ravit Show.
Hey, Ravit. Thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure, and not like I don't know you, but obviously we've known since I've known you since I think forever, and obviously I've been following your content for a while, and this was the opportunity where I wanted to bring you on and share it with a wider audience about Lakehouse, about LLMs, about Dolly 2.0, because there are a lot of interesting things that Databricks is kind of come up with. So kind of interested to know more about it. But for our audience, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ravit. Thank you for the warm welcome and having me on today. I really appreciate it. And to your audience, thank you for tuning in. My name is Franco Patano. I am a product specialist at Databricks. I'm a lead. And what I do is I essentially work with customers and product and engineering to help iron out what they need in the future. So specifically, like data platforms of the previous generation aren't really cutting it for today's needs. And so I work very closely with customers and product and engineering to figure out which of those things are the most important and that we're delivering on the results that customers want to see. So that's kind of a little bit about me. About my past, I had spent, before Databricks, I spent over 12 years in industry building global data warehouse and BI products. And essentially a new streaming project brought me to this new thing on Azure about 6 years ago called Azure Databricks. And the rest, as they say, is history. Now I'm here helping other people figure out this whole Lakehouse thing, traditionally from like a BI and warehousing perspective, but now I've grown to help with other use cases as well.
Okay, that's pretty interesting and great background there. And Franco, I'm pretty sure half the community knows you already. So thanks for that. And I was just telling our audience, obviously the topics for today would be around LLMs, about Dolly 2.0, semantic layers. So yeah, kind of interested to learn a little about what your take is. First of all, can you tell us a little about the LLMs and also the emergence of Dolly 2.0, because we've been listening about it a lot. And like I mentioned, obviously I was at Gartner London last week, and the hot topic out there was obviously generative AI, LLMs, and all of those things. But happy to hear your thoughts around it, and also want to learn a little about Dolly 2.0.
Yeah, thanks, Ravit. So first, I'll talk about industry, and then we'll get into Dolly. So what's happened over the past 6 months? The world has changed. OpenAI has been slowly working on GPT over the past few years. Those of us who've been closer to it, we've seen like GPT-3, GPT, I think there was a 2.5 a while ago, but we've seen this thing like evolve over time. And when 3.5 came out and it started making sense, the world was shocked. They were like, holy moly. They opened it up to the world, and everyone threw the kitchen sink at this thing to see if they could mess it up. What did we learn? We learned that it bullshits. I apologize, my language. We learned that it hallucinates. It basically can lie. Because if you ask it something, imagine the way I explain this to people is like, think of kids. If you ask them a question, but they don't know the answer, what are they going to do? They're going to ramble off some words that they think make sense. So it's kind of like, in my perspective, it's like a kid. It's a baby right now. It's a brilliant baby. What do I mean by that? It knows everything that we've thrown at it. It knows everything. It hasn't had the opportunity to think about everything, but it knows everything. The second you ask it a question, it can look to everything that it knows to answer your question. So then the industry, everyone started throwing tests at this thing. Can it pass the bar? Can it pass the medical exam? Can it pass this? And, what did we start seeing? Started passing tests.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot as well in terms of, not only just that, but I think there's a revolution that kind of started happening where, the content marketing work has become so easy now, and, a lot more activities. So yeah, 100% on that.
So marketing is a huge thing. I've been noticing that. So if you've been using GPT-4 for a while, like me, I use it almost every day now. It helps me so much. Like I needed to redo my gardening beds, and like at home, I have no idea anything about like gardening. I asked it some questions. I had specific requirements, like we don't really take care of the outside very well. I needed drought resistant plants. I gave it like my specifications. It built me a whole plan to fix my gardening beds. And it gave me like a list where to go shopping, what I needed to get, and how to do it. It was amazing. So I think it's much more for just content marketing. You said content marketing specific. Right. The reason why I think it's awesome at content marketing is what exists the most on the internet.
Exactly. The content, right?
Yeah. I think it's amusing. So those are some thoughts that I've had about LLMs, like how they're taking over the world. And we now talk about this every day at Databricks. I mean, Databricks sits in the middle of data and AI, right? Like all that type of things. So it's something that we're talking about a lot of nowadays, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think 100%. It's something which is more, it's like the next step where we've reached in terms of having that combination of data plus AI. Now things have become more real, as we see. Like if you're saying there's a plant that can create for a gardening bed as well, it's a huge thing, right? Back then it used to be a little different, where we used to go out and see maybe just the articles which are put down by various people, but now it kind of, it not only extracts back that data, but also kind of puts a plan together, which is it's terrific. I feel because that's what, as marketers as well, we are kind of, like we spoke a little about the content marketing, like everything you see, like the language has changed in terms of the content marketing, in terms of the marketers talking about things. It looks more mature, but that kind of also brings me to one another question around it, and I'm sure Franco, you get a lot of questions on this, which is the biases. What do you think about the bias that it might have in terms of creating a plan for you? Like, okay, you asked about certain things, you gave your requirements, you gave your situation, and you've given your level of understanding that these are the things that I know and these are the things I don't know. But what do you think about the bias that with the answer that kind of comes in? That's one another important aspect I feel, where obviously AI kind of goes to the next level, but there could be various biases to the answers that we're getting.
So let's think a little bit about that. Before we go into that, there's like two things I want to just cover. So first off, Databricks and Lakehouse, just like a little overview. Who is Databricks? We basically are the original, our co-founders are the original creators of Apache Spark. Since then, we created Delta Lake, which is a transactional protocol for dealing with a data warehouse on a data lake, and then ML Flow in Redash. And so there's basically Databricks is a bunch of open source projects, but we offer a platform in the cloud where it just works and you pay consumption. We do this thing called Lakehouse, where we believe it's the unification of things you want to do on a data lake and a warehouse. We combine it together, call it a Lakehouse, right? So when we think about bias, right, you have to understand, but where does it come from? And then what does it mean? And these are two very important topics that kind of lead into what we're going to talk about today. So the first topic is where does bias come from? Bias comes from the data that you train the model on, right? So where does that data come from? It comes from ETL. And so this is one of the biggest things that I believe in, and I want to talk to you about today, because you can control your data scientist and your data engineer. Control is the bad word. That was not a good word. They feed the model the information it needs, the data it needs, through something called ETL. What's ETL? Extract, transform, load. Basically, it's a concept that was made popularized by data warehousing, but it's not just a data warehousing thing. ETL is basically, how do you get data from the form it was generated in? So if you think about like devices, IoT devices, it's the machine code it was generated in. Can we understand that machine code as humans? No. It needs to be transformed into a language that we understand. Same thing for like social feeds. Like a lot of companies are doing massive data ingest from social feeds where they take all the data and then but you can't read that and comprehend that as a human. It needs to be transformed into a way. So essentially ETL, I consider it the lifeblood of a model, because it's how a model becomes smart. And if you look at what OpenAI did, OpenAI basically built, we're still learning about it. There's, it's interesting. OpenAI, there's like a open side to it, a non-for-profit and a for-profit. I still don't understand how it works yet, although I agree with it. If you can non-for-profit your R&D and profitize your OpEx, that sounds like the right way to do it. Although I don't know if it's good for everybody, but it's good for them. I think it's really smart. But what they did is they had a lot of data and they had a lot of money. I think 100 billion they were talking about, or 100 million, I forget, with large numbers of money that they spent on Azure to these lots of data, basically the internet, books, literature, everything. And then they created large models. Stuff is still coming out of what they're doing, but we think what they're doing is something along the lines of like either not one big model, but maybe a bunch of models strung together like an ensemble. I don't know. Again, these are like things that we're hearing and we're starting to read of coming out from them. So essentially, what we think is the approaches to this. You can do a big bang where you do what OpenAI did. You spend billions on data and models and compute time to train these models on everything. And when you increase the parameter size, people say it makes it smarter. That's not the real way to think about it. But when you increase the parameter size, it can understand more because it can make more connections. And if you think about the human brain, the more connection it makes across the brain, the more that it can comprehend, right? So that's how I think about it. data is kind of like all of the experiences of the world. The model parameters is how big of a brain you're given this thing. So you can pour more and more money. It's infinite amount of money that you can pour into these things for data and for brain size, right?
Yeah.
Now, what is Databricks thinking about? Like, what's the other side to this? We think that with Dolly, so Dolly 2.0, we released 2 versions of Dolly. We think that businesses can be much more precise, because they don't need a general model that they can chat with about anything in the world. Like I needed to chat with it about gardening, right? They have one purpose. I need a customer service bot to answer questions for my customers, right? I needed to know everything about my products and services. I needed to know everything about the trouble tickets, and I needed to answer questions for my customer. Do you need to train a $1 billion model? No. We think you can do it with like hundreds of bucks and good data, right? So that's kind of the role of all this. And just a high level overview. I'd like to go into some specifics, but one thing that I'd like to kind of layer on top is the semantic layer. So that's like the last piece of the puzzle, the why, the how it became smart, but then why did it have bias in the first place? Explaining that to a business user, when you have the translation of the ETL. So consider the ETL, the technical translation. You don't have a business lexicon translation natively in the ETL. What you would do is you would document this with lineage and a data dictionary. And traditionally, this is how you would manage like what my data is and why is this a certain way. What I think it's all missing is semantics to actually bring it all together. How do I apply the syntax and phrenology of the business on top of the technical gobbledygook that's coming out of all these source systems? And I think that's the last missing piece to understand the why of the what. The what can move the data and make it readable, but to understand the why of the what, you need semantics. And that's kind of how I think all these things fit together.
Yeah, no, I think these are fantastic insights, Franco, in terms of, obviously you started with talking about the OpenAI and also a good example in terms of why Dolly 2.0, and then giving us a good deeper dive into obviously the LLMs and the biases for sure. So thanks for sharing that. We have a question around the future, and this is from YouTube. So I would love to take this one from Sonia Basra. What future developments or advancements do you foresee in the integration of Lakehouse platform, semantic layer, and data processing techniques for LLMs? Which is interesting because you've kind of, obviously explained these points and kind of shown how they, kind of connect with each other. But yeah, would be interesting to learn more about, obviously the future developments or advancements. I'm pretty sure there's a lot in the making which is going on, and I'm sure you would like to share about that once they kind of come out. But I'm pretty sure the audience would love to learn a little about that they haven't seen already, and that's in the making. So anything that you can share, Franco.
So first off, I will share with you what I think, and I need to preface this by saying these are my personal views, not the views of Databricks. I can't tell you. I am not at liberty to discuss what we're announcing in 1 month at our summit. It's the Data and AI Summit in June. So please sign up. You can find out all of the announcements we're going to make in 1 month, and I tell you, they're pretty awesome. But I will tell you what I think. So, what I think is in the future is what I consider auto Babel. We've all heard the story of the Tower of Babel, right? Like there was no way to translate these languages between each other. I think it was like Egyptian and I forget exactly what it was, but basically there's like this translation that is missing from business and technical. And this bridge, this gap, I think has persisted over time. And it's not like there have been a lot of different ways that people have helped. A semantic layer is one of them, right? Business semantics on top of data processing, right, helped out. The problem that I see in practice, like these ideas are great, right? A lot of vendors provide you great platforms to build this stuff, but one of the things, so I was at Alteryx last week. They're they have a large analytics community. They made product announcements. Everything is about LLMs into the product. If you look at all the product announcements, Azure had their big product announcements last week. They think they can take out Databricks and Snowflake. Good luck. So what I think is in store is everyone's product roadmap is changing to include LLMs. Alteryx put something in its roadmap called Magic Documents, where you can give it a directory of PDFs and you can ask it questions and it'll search the PDFs for the answer. Where was that 10 years ago? Like, oh my gosh, do you know how much time that would have saved me? Like, holy moly, as an analyst, like that tool, I think you're going to see that everywhere. I think every product across the data landscape has to figure out how to put LLMs into their product, or they're going to figure out just how yesterday their product was, right? And people are going to be looking to the future. So what I think we're going to see more of, if you think about Magic Documents for a second, I can have a folder of documents, ask a question, and it would answer me, right? Now think about it. What if you had a unified spot that had all of your semantics, your data dictionary, your lineage, your understanding of what's going on with your data? Now let's say you had this system and you could ask questions of it. Maybe it would generate SQL and then query the underlying data system for those questions, for those answers. Maybe the lineage and the data dictionary that you gave this unified layer would be able to understand and contextualize the answer to your question. And what if it were able to just answer your question without even having like the SQL intermediary there, right? Like those things are super provocative. Like, if you think about, I've been in BI and data warehousing for a long time, right? Like really what users want is they want the answer to their question. Do they want a dashboard? Not really. It's what we built for them, right? To answer their question. What do they really want? I want the answer to my question, right? So that's what I think the future is. The future is, how do we close this gap that we've been throwing products in for decades? Like we've been throwing products, dashboards, reports, this, that. We've been trying to figure out how do we use machine learning and AI. I think this is it. I think we're finally starting to see the very early days of what the future is. And that's what I foresee. I see LLMs being baked into every single product. You are I think the interface of the future is an LLM, basically. Like you're not going to, are we going to continue to have these Windows machines where we visualize? Yeah, humans are visual people, but the interface, I think, is totally going to change. Are we going to be clicking and holding and dragging on a screen to get stuff done? I don't know. Are you going to be explaining to a bot what you need to get done and just going to figure it out? Maybe.
Yeah. No, I think, first of all, good question, Sonia. Thanks for bringing up this. And I think, Franco, that's a good point in terms of, obviously, where you mentioned, obviously, if this was what one would have got like 10 years back, the scenario of the community in the data space altogether would have been really different. But I think also about the future, it kind of everything's kind of going to be around LLMs, and they're going to be a lot more. We have already started seeing those advancements in companies kind of wanting to get into the game. So that's very true. That also brings me to another question. You spoke a little about semantic layer, and I'm obviously at with Databricks and at scale semantic layer, there's good integration that kind of happens. So first of all, just for our audience, if they are new to the term, which I don't think anyone's anymore new to the semantic layer as a term, new to it, it's one of the hottest topic last week that we were discussing at Gartner as well. So yeah, would love to hear your thoughts around, first of all, what is semantic layer, and then tell us a little about the integration with the Lakehouse platform, and anything else that you would like to share, Franco.
Yeah, so there are a couple of comments that have come up and asking about like how does Delta Live Tables work together with it, and then also like just there are a couple of questions about this, and I want to connect a couple dots for folks. So first off, what is Delta Live Tables? Well, Delta Live Tables is a pipelining service on Databricks that basically makes creating pipelines significantly simpler on Databricks. How simple? SQL simple. If you just know SQL, you can write pipelines on Delta Live tables. It's basically, if you've ever written like create table as, we call them CTAS for short in the industry. But basically, if you've ever created CTAS before, that's Delta Live tables. It's dependent CTAS all the way down. And what our service does is it basically takes that operation, it compiles it, and it creates a pipeline for you. It actually creates a UI, a GUI, it shows it to you. So if you have visual people that like to see it, we have a GUI. It's not interactive. You can't like change things because it's all code-based. But essentially, it allows visual people to interact. And what we did is it's very hard to advise, like, what are the benefits of this new thing? And I actually went out there about 3 years ago when we started thinking about Delta Live Table ETL on Databricks. And I was like, where is there an ETL benchmark? Because as an industry, I think we beat up TPCDS, which if you don't know, TPCDS is the query serving benchmark. Every vendor will show you a benchmark that shows they're the best. You know, and personally, like when I was practicing in industry, I fell victim to this too. It's like, oh, okay, that sounds good. But if you go around, they'll all show you a benchmark that shows how they're the best, right? So how can you really trust it? And then when I was practicing at Databricks in my early days, I actually had customers used to complain. They're like, TPCDS is nonsense. It's pretty data. You get perfect data and you just write queries. No one has perfect data. Like, it's nonsense. And I was like, you're right. I practiced for over 10 years. There was never clean data. There was never perfect data. I was always chasing data problems. And so I went out there. I was like, is there a real ETL benchmark that's like, has dirty data, has all the complex business logic? And I found one. It's actually called TPCDI. It's the Data Integration Benchmark, or the ETL benchmark. It was created about 10 years ago from the TPC, the Transaction Performance Council. I'm missing a word. Anyway, it's the independent body that creates industry standard benchmarks from feedback from across the industry, right? And so this benchmark is unlike any other benchmark that exists. They don't give you code. It's actually created to be vendor agnostic. So ETL tools, there's some code tools and there's some GUI tools. Informatica, Talend, Ab initio, you can't code in those tools, right? Those are GUI tools. You click, hold, and drag. And then you have like other tools that are code-based, right? And so this benchmark gives you 117 pages of business requirements document for a data warehouse build. And it gives you a data generator to produce files, like flat files, CSV, text files, XML. I say XML and people are like, what? This was, again, it's like a 10-year-old benchmark, right? So it's a little earlier days. But yeah, basically it's based on a factitious retail brokerage firm. It has a bunch of source systems and it has dirty data. It has data quality issues you need to clean up. You have to maintain key consistency between tables. It's data warehousing, right? It has SCD type 2. It has a bunch of the typical logic you want to do in a data warehouse. And so we wanted to prove that Databricks or Delta Live Tables was the best ETL engine or framework in the world. And so we took this benchmark and we built it out on Databricks. Now, because we've been going in the news with our competitors back and forth, we decided not to go against a competitor at first, just because we want to set the standard. Like, we believe so much that this is like going to be the new way that people do ETL. We're like, hey, let's just compare it against ourselves. So we did a baseline, which was like manual orchestration using our same product. We're going to manually orchestrate everything. And then we'll have Delta Live Tables auto-magically orchestrate and manage everything. We just gave it the CTAS code, right? Like, here's all the CTAS code for all the business logic in this code. You figure it out. And what we found was actually ridiculous. We spent more time analyzing the results than we should have, but we found that we were able to process 1 terabyte of flat files. So CSV, text, fixed width, XML, into a data warehouse model. Remember, it had dirty data, SCD type 2, window logic, all the complex business logic you need to implement. 1 terabyte of files into a data warehouse like DIM and fact tables, less than 10 minutes and under $10. 1 terabyte of data. So we were flabbergasted. We were like, this is amazing. No one has ever measured Databricks' performance on ETL. Again, most people, nobody thinks about ETL. It's kind of like the redheaded stepchild of data processing. It's like, oh, it's going to get there eventually, right? But now in today's world, people want live data. They want data that's happening right now, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we built. Is we built this streaming high-scale pipelining service with Delta Live tables, and we wanted to prove to the world with a big splash that it's legit. It's the bee's knees. And so what we did is we open sourced the repo to reproduce this code. So anybody can take this repo and they can put it in their own Databricks workspace and they can evaluate it themselves. We completely made it open. The next big thing is we're actually working with other communities. So right now we've been working with the DBT community to make a DBT version so you can run it on any warehouse. But again, the whole point of this is that the lifeblood of a model, of an LLM is data, right? And so if you want to feed that model, remember, OpenAI spent hundreds of millions to $1 billion to train the model, right? We're saying you could do a terabyte for less than $10.
Wow.
That's pretty provocative, right? Like getting that data from wherever it sits into a way that it can get into Dolly or into your own model. We think that's pretty important. So that's kind of my perspective on all this. And I think it's important to have good semantics because getting the data is just one part of the puzzle. I think you have to have understanding of the data. Because if you don't understand the data, like getting a bunch of it into a good spot is only half the battle, right? You need to understand the data in order to do something with it.
Yeah, no, I think 100% Franco. These are amazing insights. I think definitely what you're kind of on the path of building in, with the ETL, it kind of makes a lot of sense. So that kind of also brings me to another question, which is around Dolly 2.0, and I would love to learn a little about what's like the response that you've seen for the Dolly 2.0, and also a little about if there are potential applications of Dolly 2.0 in organization or various industries that you would like to let us know about. Would be interesting just to kind of connect it to the practical use case, if that's something you would like to share.
Yeah. All right. So Dolly, it was great. We think that it has a purpose. Like it's not going to serve everybody's purpose, but what Dolly's original purpose was, can we take that magic that OpenAI did, and can you package it up for organizations in like the Fortune 2000 across the world, right? Not every corporation in the world can afford hundreds of millions to billions of dollars in building and maintaining models, right? So our point of view is, can you build good enough for general enterprises? So that was the point of Dolly. And we released it, and we're like, for I think it was $30, you could train your own Dolly. And so that is accessible to virtually any enterprise or startup across the world, right? $30 to train your own model. That's great. But the first thing that they all asked after we showed it to them and after they built it was, great, I want to put this in production and use it for commercial use. And we're like, wait, the data set that it was fine-tuned on is not available for commercial use, so you can't do that. And they were like, what the hell? You created this awesome thing, now we can't use it. So our fine leaders in their grand wisdom went back to the drawing board, and they're like, you know what? We're smart people. We have smart people that work for us. We could build a data set and then make it available for commercial use to fine-tune Dolly on. And that's what we did. We had a contest internally in the company.
Wow.
And basically, we wanted like over 14,000 pairs. There's 5 different groupings of the pairs, but like we wanted so many. And so we have 6,000 employees, and they made a contest, and we got it done. I think a week. We had all the questions in there. I mean, it should have taken every 6,000 employees 3 questions, right? It should have taken 5 minutes, if you ask me. But everyone's busy. Everyone's got their own schedule, right?
Got it.
But yeah, no, it took about a week, and then we crossed the threshold. Thanks to everyone who did it. I did it. I actually won in 2 areas because I'm personally, I need the model to do things for me. So I kind of I peppered it with stuff that I needed in the question and answer section. But yeah, it's awesome. Now anyone can use Dolly for commercial use. What I think is awesome about this is not that we did it, but that we open sourced it and we gave it away to the community.
Right.
And what happened next was absolutely amazing. People started taking it and started fine tuning other models with it. Mosaic ML also recently released MPT 7B, which is similar, but has way more token length, which is much more usable for organizations that want to do more fine tuning. And what I thought was awesome about Mosaic was that they released their model, open sourced it, awesome. But then they also fine tune it on 3 sets. They made a instruct version. So there's an MPT 7B instruct flavor that was actually trained on Dolly 15K. And we used internally, we kind of took MPT 7B instruct and we used it internally. And we found that it was actually kind of smarter than Dolly, which is great. Again, we're not interested in just Dolly. I think we're more interested in making the data set commercially available and then helping customers build the thing they need to build as cheaply and effectively as possible so that they can service their business needs. And if you do that on Databricks, that's awesome. We'll stitch all the complexity together for you so it's super simple. But again, we open source all this stuff. So if you want to take it and run with it on-prem, go for it. We don't think there's value on-prem anymore just because the rate of change of technology. But we're not trying to lock you in. So if you want to use Databricks, awesome. If you don't, it's open source.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for sharing that, Franco. I think that kind of makes a lot of sense. So also there's one question here that since we are on this topic of LLM, let's pick this one up. What are key benefits of employing advanced data processing techniques when creating a domain-specific LLM? Any thoughts here, Franco?
Yeah. So really, okay. So when you're thinking about creating a domain-specific LLM, what you're really doing is it's a data engineering project, because you need to go find all that data that's domain-specific to your domain, and you need to prepare it for training. So really, like the processing techniques is germane to building a model that is smart and domain specific. And what do you need to do? Like, what are the things that you need to think about? You need to give it diverse data sets. You can't just plug in data from one source into the model and think that you won't get bias. That in and of itself is bias when you're only feeding data from one source into a model, right? The other thing that you need to think about is, how can I vary my sources? How can I vary like the types of data I'm feeding this model? And so that's where I would focus more. About the specific model, I don't think, personally, this is my personal, I could be wrong. Machine learning people can argue with me, right? They could absolutely do that. That's your right. Argue with me. Let's have some discourse about it. I don't think that you should focus on the model very much. I think we're going to be swapping out models for the next 5 to 10 years, like they are engines in a car, except it's significantly easier to do. Imagine if you had a Honda and you were able to put the Ferrari engine inside, but then every 2 days, it seems like every 2 to 5 days, someone else is creating a bigger, better Ferrari engine. And you just wanted to keep putting that bigger, better Ferrari engine into your car, into your Honda, right? Because it's a cheap Honda. You want a cheap Honda, but you want a good engine inside, right? I think that's what's going to happen to these models, is that people are going to create bigger, better, tougher, stronger, smarter models. What's going to be most important is your training set, your training data. You want your training data to be varied. You want lots of different sources, and you want as much as possible, right? Because if you have your data set ironed out, swapping out your model and retraining or fine tuning is like stuff you pay for in the cloud. It just has dollars and time attached to it, right? So then it just becomes, we want to swap out MPT. I don't know. Let's hallucinate ourselves into the future a little bit. We want to do MPT 12B or MPT 15B with this data set. Or somebody comes out with ZPT 100B, right? In 2 years. What matters the most to switching that out? Your data set. Can you swap out the model with your data, with your training set? So I think that the pipeline is the most important part of this whole thing. That we call it feature tables or feature sets. I think that's the most important part. Your ETL, the models, I think for at least the next 5 to 10 years, people are going to be swapping them out like engine parts. Like think of like tuners, people that like to tune cars, right? They're constantly swapping out parts. The new part comes out. I don't want that new part, right? I think that's what's going to happen. That's what we're going to see is that people are going to be swapping out parts of the model, maybe the pipeline of the model. But do you know what's not going to be swapped out? Your training data. You might add to it. You might add more sources to your training data, but you're not going to swap out your training data.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's what I kind of think is going to happen, and why I think that data process, it's your pipeline. So like, what are the key benefits of data processing? It's your pipeline. Your pipeline is your lifeblood, right? Take care of the lifeblood. The models, we can swap out the brain, right?
Yeah.
I think the lifeblood is most important.
Yeah, I think those are great points there, Franco. So thanks for sharing that. And that's a good perspective. And definitely for those who are machine learning engineers out there, if you're looking out to, obviously, if you have an argument for Franco, reach out to him. He's your guy. He'll definitely, I think y'all will enjoy this conversation. Franco offline, when you meet him, he's more informational and he's more open. So don't hesitate to reach out to him for that. But shifting gears, not really shifting gears, but also wanting, since we've been on this topic around Lakehouse platform, at scale, semantic layer, delta live tables. So just wondering if you could share maybe a real world example of how the integration kind of looks like for Dolly 2.0. If you kind of pick, Lakehouse platform with at scale, semantic layer, and delta live tables, how does that look like? Anything that you would like to share, Franco?
So this actually has been asked a lot over the past 3 months at Databricks. So like, we actually came out, I'm going to share another link if you can share it out with
sure.
community. So we've been asked this question a lot. Like, what really the core root of the question, what's everybody else doing, right? Everybody wants to know, what's everyone else doing? How are they using it? Are they benefiting from it? Like, what are they seeing? Can I give you specific use cases? I can. I'd have to de-identify the corporations that pay us a lot of money not to tell them about this stuff, right? But what I will tell you is that we took all of what everyone's doing on Databricks and we de-identified it and aggregated it so we could share it with the world. And we created this thing called the 2023 State of Data and AI Report. Really, the big thing that we noticed is as soon as ChatGPT launched in November on Databricks, we saw LLM APIs and tools just skyrocket. And people were already using transformer related libraries already. People had already built bots on Databricks. Let's get something straight here. OpenAI didn't create anything new, right? They just made it smarter. And they spent a lot more money on making it smarter. And then they kind of just got marketing buzz. But people have been using, corporations have been using Databricks for this type of functionality for years, right? Like, this is kind of what we're built on. What we did with this report is it showed the world what people are doing on Databricks now that this whole LLM thing exploded. And so you can, Ravit shared a link to the report. You can absolutely take a look at that. Specific things that we've been helping customers with. The biggest one, I would say, amongst them all, is the customer service chatbot. That's the biggest one. Being able to take the context of your organization and put it into a bot and save you the headcounts of customer service agents, whether it's full-time or like overflow. Like, what we notice is that some organizations, they still have staff, CSRs, but their overflow goes to the bot. And that kind of gives you like a 1 foot in. Some organizations have completely flipped and they have like a sensitivity thing when you're on the phone with them. If they notice you get annoyed or upset with the bot, they'll send you to a human. So it all depends on like your organization and like how pissed off your customers are and like what you're doing. I'll tell you, like if you're a utility company, people are more upset when their services are out than if you are like, I'm not saying Netflix uses us, but if Netflix goes out, for example, it might not necessarily be Netflix's problem because they operate on AWS. It could be AWS was the problem, but I digress. Those are what we're seeing by and far. The biggest use cases today is these chatbots. Customer service is huge, the customer service bot, but that's not the only thing that people are building. And if you look at that report, we actually de-identified and aggregated information from our over 9,000 customers across the globe. And you can read that report if you want to see what everyone else is doing.
Yeah. No, I think what I've done is also thanks for sharing that. And for those who wish to, obviously look at the report, they can download it here. It's available for everyone for free. So thanks for sharing that, Franco. Those are great points there. Quick one in terms of just a little, since we are on this topic of LLMs. I know we've spoken a lot about LLMs, but for obvious reasons, because it's hot and it's trending and why. So, but the question comes to obviously what is the future potential, of this unified data processing approach in enhancing LLMs, and where do you see it going basically? So yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on
that. So there are some thoughts that I've heard, and there's some thoughts that I think are true, and some things that I think we need more time to see if they will be true. But I think we're already seeing the beginning. Every product or platform across the cloud, and I don't even know, do people still buy on-premises software? Across on-premises software, you're seeing it across the board. Everyone is putting LLMs into their product, right? Like it's taking over. What I think is what's going to differentiate players versus makers in the next 6 to 24 months is who can pivot to giving a good user experience with the LLM in their product.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how fast can you change your pricing model so that you can cannibalize your own revenue from your non-LLM products and services? I think these two decisions are going to make or break a lot of startups and mid-growth companies, software companies. I think it's similar to these are some other thoughts that I've heard. People think that it is similar to the internet or like Windows / Mac Mac OS back when Mac first came out, right? The GUI. We think that it's a GUI / internet experience, right? Where like it's going to change the game. Everyone realizes that it changes the game. I think the winners are going to be the ones that pivot hard and figure out how to cannibalize their own revenue, because it's the innovator's dilemma. You're always going to come up upon it. That's what I think is going to be the hardest thing, and that's what the future will yield. The future will yield who was the best at pivoting to this new technology change, and who was the best at cannibalizing their own revenue to make that change and go forward. I don't know. Like at this point, like I do have a crystal ball. We can look into it. Like that's what I think that time will tell. Time will tell who are the real makers. Like who's in it to like make the future, and who's in it just to see if they can make a couple extra bucks by slapping some LLMs into their products, right? Like I've been seeing some of these product releases that have LLMs in them. They're a lot of marketing, a little bit of product. On the other side, you have a whole lot of product and a little bit of marketing. I think these things, time will tell who the real winners and losers are. But I think the parameters and the metrics that they are judged on are going to be those two.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree. Those are great points there. It's just more on the side where you need to have that balance in terms of, having, definitely having LLMs in the product, but in a way which kind of makes sense to the customers as well. But that kind of brings me to something which is kind of connected. So how often are you hearing it from the customers as well, from your partners that, what type of LLM does Databricks have in? Do they have any requirement there, like they're specifically talking about it?
So 2 weeks ago, I was in Chicago. We had two events. We had a partner event and the first Chicago Databricks meetup. If you're in Chicago, we have a Databricks meetup now. Come check us out.
Okay. Sure.
But we did two events. So you asked about partners and customers, right? So 2 weeks ago, I had two events where I was sitting with a full house. So we had an event with partners in Chicago, over 100 in attendance, full house, standing room only at the end. And then we had at our Databricks meetup, again, we had over 120 people sign up. We had over 90, I think, actually show up, standing room only. Because we were talking about two big things, ETL, LLMs, and the future. And everyone is, so not just consultants, but customers, like the meetup was for people. Not customers directly, but like people who actually do work in the industries, right? Everyone is super interested about LLMs. Every customer is asking their consultants about LLMs. They are having to learn about LLMs very, very fast. And a lot of people, they come to us because we've been doing this stuff for a long time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Databricks is data and AI, but like really Lakehouse was a shift to doing more warehousing. Like I'm the Databricks SQL product specialist. I've been trying to preach to the world the best warehouse is a Lakehouse because warehousing was like that big growing area in the cloud, especially with big prominent players like Snowflake, right? So obviously we can do data warehousing. We tried making that play, but then all of a sudden this year, everything has shifted towards LLMs. In my perspective, I believe that ETL feeds these LLMs. And if you are looking for a platform of the future, find something that does really, really well price performant ETL and can get you training on these models for super cheap. Now, I'm biased, right? But I will tell you that we have open sourced and published benchmarks that you can use yourself and verify that we have best in class ETL and model training on Databricks across the clouds. But again, you can make your own judgments and assertion by taking those open source projects, implementing them yourself. And I even ask you, go implement them on-prem or on another cloud manually. Because again, they're open source, right? See if you can beat Databricks' price performance. I don't think you can, but I'd love being proved wrong. So try it out.
No, 100%, Franco, and this will definitely help our audience to learn more about, obviously the LLMs and how they can implement, and good that it's open source. And yes, for those who are listening, if you want to reach out to Franco, challenge him on something, go on air, chat with him. He's super cool. So yeah, thanks for that, Franco. Quick one in terms of, you mentioned about the Data and AI Summit, right? When is it happening? Can you tell the audience where can they find the link to it? Where can they register? And what's the theme for this year? I'm pretty sure LLMs is one of the biggest themes, but what else can they learn by visiting the conference?
Yeah, I just sent you the link if you want to put it in chat.
Yeah, sure.
Databricks.com/Data AI Summit is the site. So this year's theme is Generation AI, kind of like a play on words. We think we're the generation that brings AI into the world. We also, Generation AI is like the using of AI to generate content. So that's like the theme of our event. And to say we're doing some stuff on LLMs is an understatement. It's June 26th to the 29th in San Francisco at the Moscone Center, but it's also virtual. So we recommend coming in person. We think this is going to be the event of the year to attend in person. I don't know if you've ever been to a Databricks party, but the Databricks party don't stop. But you should definitely check it out. But even if you can't make it in person, we are going to have it virtual this year. So you can even watch the content online. And then after every Data and AI Summit, we always post all of the talks onto YouTube. It kind of takes a while. There's a lot of talks. People don't realize there's almost like 1,000 talks or something like that at Data and AI Summit, and they're customer driven. So these are people that built stuff on Databricks. It's not just Databricks people, but these are customer or speaker sessions where they tell you what they built using our tech. Right. So we think it's a great place to come and learn and figure out what everyone else is doing. And then, you can ask them directly. How are you building LLMs? How are you getting the value out of it? And how is Databricks helping you? Personally, I think that's the best part of Data and AI Summit is the community. Yeah. That's why I love going. I love going and work building the community. You'll find me, out in the crowd all the time. I've got a couple talks this year, but you'll find me at events. You'll find me in the crowd. Definitely come up to me, ask questions. If you have a challenge, let's go. But this year's going to be fun. I also have an event I've been thinking about doing. I've been talking to Ravit and some other influencers about. So, because there's another event that's going on at the same time. So maybe we'll do something.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing all the details. And I'm kind of registered for it. And if I'm, obviously flying in, I'm gonna try and make it to the summit for sure. So Franco, thanks for that. Looking forward. Great speaker list. I also saw, obviously, I guess Satya is also there. Satya Nadella. Yeah, if I'm not wrong. So
Satya's going to be there. He's going to be talking. There's also Eric Schmidt, I believe, is on there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So lots of what we consider are industry leaders in this space, and not just the AI space, but the data and AI space. So like the creator of LangChain, Harrison Chase, a lot of the CEOs that we respect in the world. So, it's not just Databricks talking. We really got a really good assortment of thought leaders and practitioners across the space.
Yeah, can't wait. Definitely. And it's one of the, obviously, I had attended it virtually last year, and it was one of the, I guess, it did happen virtually last year as well, right? Franco?
Yeah, it was both. We had a combined thing last year.
So I know for a fact where it's so educational, and even if you kind of, on the platform, you are attending with 1,000 more other folks who are attending virtually, you kind of, get to network there as well. So great stuff that Databricks puts out every year for the community. So looking forward to it. But one last question from you, Franco. I know we've spoken at length. We've spoken about Lakehouse platform, Semantic Layer, Delta tables in LLMs, and Dolly 2.0, much more that we've obviously explored today. But if folks want to reach out to you, learn more about things that we've spoken, they want to argue with you, they want to challenge, they want to obviously build something with you, and obviously help the community, where can they find you?
You can mostly find me, cruising the halls of LinkedIn. I'll kind of send you my link if you want to share it out with everyone. It's LinkedIn. Franco Patano is my tag, but definitely come harass me on LinkedIn. It's kind of where I like to have all of my discourse in an open forum. I don't delete comments. I think that you should bring forth any of your challenge or questions. Like a lot of time, I feel like people they're curious. Definitely ask questions. And even if you have product feedback, there's a couple of folks that, every time they reach friction, they're like, hey, they comment on one of my posts, and then I go talk to product engineering about it. So definitely hit me up if you want to DM me. If you're looking for a job, we are hiring. We are hiring all over the board. So if you're looking for a job in data and AI, or if LLMs light your fire, come join us. We're spearheading the future. But yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to help you out if you want to get interested in this space, or if you want to challenge any of these ideas I've had today, and we want to have some formal discourse on a social platform, that's cool too. But happy to help all of you filter your curiosity or fire up your curiosity and help you learn.
Awesome. Thanks, Franco. Thanks again for visiting the Ravit Show. This is super helpful for our audience. Can't wait to do a 2.0 session. Can't wait to do something more with Databricks. And obviously looking forward to the upcoming conference. And I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of talking around a lot of interesting topics there. So looking forward to that. Thank you once again for doing this. And thanks to our audience for joining us today and asking all the questions.
Thank you.
Awesome.